The concept of immortality is usually sold as the ultimate human dream, but Keanu Reeves seems determined to show us it is actually a relentless waking nightmare. His comic book creation known as BRZRKR is finally moving through the gears at Netflix, and it feels like the culmination of everything he has built over his long career. This project is not just another paycheck or a standard action flick, because Keanu literally birthed this world alongside Matt Kint and Ron Garney. It is his vision through and through. While the casual observer might look at a guy with long hair and a gun and think we are just getting another John Wick clone, the reality is much darker and far more ambitious than anything we have seen in the Wickverse. The story centers on a man known only as B, who is half human and half god, and has been wandering the earth for about 80,000 years. He has been a tool for kings and a weapon for empires, and basically an immortal slab of meat used to settle every major conflict in human history. In the modern day, he has struck a deal with the United States government to handle the Black Ops missions that would turn a normal person into red mist. In exchange, he wants the one thing most people spend their lives trying to avoid, which is the ability to finally die. This isn't just a power fantasy about a guy who can't be killed, but a deep psychological study on what happens to a soul after 80 centuries of trauma and loss. It is like the gritty realism of Logan, mixed with the surreal violence of a high-octane anime and the existential weight of a Greek tragedy. There has been some chatter among film buffs that Keanu might be pigeonholing himself into this one-man army archetype, but that is a narrow way to look at it. My theory is that B is actually the final evolution of the Keanu persona. If Neo was the digital god and John Wick is the modern urban legend, then B is the primal ancestor of all of them. This role allows him to lean into that signature stoic melancholy he does so well, while also going absolutely wild with the combat. We are talking about a character who has mastered every weapon and fighting style since the Stone Age. The potential for the action sequences is limitless because the film is leaning into a hard R rating, which means we will see the true brutal consequences of a god-tier warrior fighting human soldiers. The production team behind this is a fascinating mix of high-speed spectacle and deep narrative world-building. Justin Lin is taking the director's chair, which is an interesting pivot from the Fast and Furious franchise. While he is a master of scale and logistics, I think he is looking for something with more emotional teeth, and BRZRKR provides exactly that. He is working with Mattson Tomlin, who has been heavily involved in Matt Reeves' The Batman. Tomlin is a writer who understands how to balance massive sci-fi concepts with very grounded human emotions. Having these two collaborate with Keanu ensures that the movie will have the polish of a blockbuster, but the soul of an indie passion project. Netflix is clearly betting the house on this being their next massive cinematic universe. They are not just stopping at a live-action feature film. There is an anime series in development with Keanu returning to voice the character, and it is already greenlit for 2 seasons. This is where the geek in me gets really excited because the anime format allows for the kind of over-the-top, visceral gore and mythical scale that even a massive movie budget might struggle to capture. We could see entire episodes dedicated to B fighting in the Napoleonic Wars or surviving the fall of the Roman Empire. The structure of the film itself will likely use a non-linear approach similar to The Witcher, where we see the modern-day missions echoed by his ancient memories. The real secret weapon here might be the involvement of Chad Stahelski and the 8711 stunt team. Even though Justin Lin is directing, Keanu has deep ties to the best fight choreographers in the business, and there are rumors they will be consulting on the combat. Imagine the tactical precision of John Wick, but performed by a man with the strength of a demigod who can take 100 bullets and keep moving. It creates a completely different rhythm for the action scenes. We are going to see a mix of ancient swordplay and modern firearms that feels raw and bone-crunching. This is the kind of project that succeeds only if the studio doesn't try to sanitize it for a wider audience. It needs to stay bloody and messy and heartbreaking to truly respect the source material. The success of the comic book debut was a massive signal to the industry, with over 600,000 copies sold right out of the gate. People are hungry for this specific blend of mythology and modern warfare. My personal theory is that the US government in the story isn't actually looking for a way to kill B, but is instead trying to find a way to replicate his DNA to create an entire army of immortals. That would set up a perfect conflict where B has to fight against versions of himself to protect his own chance at peace. Whether it becomes a massive franchise or a standalone epic, This is clearly the project Keanu was born to make, and it could be the definitive R-rated action experience of the decade. The rumor mill and the deep lore within the comics suggest that the live-action movie will pivot away from a standard linear origin story, and instead lean into a massive conspiracy thriller that feels like a blend of the Bourne Identity and American Gods. My personal theory is that the film will center on the discovery that the US government is not actually trying to help B find a way to die, but is instead using his blood to fuel a secret renewable energy project. Since B is essentially a walking lightning bolt with 80,000 years of combat experience, he is the most valuable natural resource on the planet. The plot likely kicks off when B realizes that the medical treatments he receives are actually extracting a refined version of his immortal essence to power a new generation of autonomous weapons. This would lead to a narrative structure where the film shifts between a high-stakes escape in the present day and specific historical echoes that explain how he became a god in the first place. I suspect the movie will focus heavily on a hidden era of history that the comics only teased, which is the time B spent as a high-ranking commander during the fall of the Mongol Empire. The theory is that B once tried to build his own kingdom to find peace, but the very power that makes him immortal also makes him a magnet for disaster and betrayal. By showing his failure as a leader in the past, the movie can better highlight his isolation in the modern world as he navigates a landscape of cold glass buildings and digital surveillance that feels even more alien to him than the ancient wilderness. If the government tries to use her as leverage, B would likely enter a level of the berserker state we have never seen before, which would involve him literally burning out the electronics of an entire city using his internal electrical energy. This sets up a climax where B has to decide if he will become the monster the military wants, or if he will sacrifice his only chance at mortality to save the one person who actually sees him as a man. There is also a strong possibility that the movie introduces a rival immortal, which would be a huge departure from the source material, but would make for an incredible cinematic experience. Imagine a second warrior who was born from the same prehistoric event, but chose to embrace the chaos and has been pulling the strings of history from the shadows for centuries. This would turn the film into a clash of titans where Keanu is not just fighting soldiers, but is fighting a dark reflection of his own soul. It would explain why the government has been so successful in tracking him, because they have had another immortal advisor helping them the entire time. This direction would elevate the film from a standard action movie into a philosophical war between two gods who have very different views on what it means to live forever. The ending of the film will probably leave the door wide open for the anime series to fill in the gaps of his other lives. My theory is that the movie ends with B going off the grid entirely and becoming a ghost in the machine as he starts a one-man war against the global power structures that have exploited him for generations. This would transition the character from a weary soldier looking for an exit into a proactive force for justice, which fits perfectly with the heroic image Keanu Reeves has built over the decades. It would be a massive payoff for fans to see him finally take control of his own destiny after 80 millennia of being everyone else's weapon. The visual potential for the flashback sequences is where Justin Lin can really flex his muscles and move away from the urban grit of John Wick to something truly mythic. The ultimate endgame for this Keanu-verse seems to be a total reimagining of what an action franchise can be. It is not just about the body count, but about the burden of memory and the cost of survival. If my theory about the government using B as a biological power source is correct, the finale of the film will probably involve him literally overloading the modern world with the energy of 80,000 years of war. It would be a breathtaking cinematic moment to see a city go dark, while B finally walks away into the shadows, no longer a weapon, but a man looking for his own beginning. This project is clearly the culmination of everything Keanu loves about storytelling, and it is going to be a wild ride for every geek and comic fan out there.